Hi, folks. This is Jeph Loeb, and welcome to the show. You're listening to the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.
Well, greetings, Cap fans, and welcome to another episode of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. It is episode 293, and I'm your host, Rick Verbanis. Of course, I've got a co-host, and he's the best gosh darn one out there. His name is Mr. Bob Lucius. Oh, Bob, the risk of love is loss, and the price of loss is grief.
I don't know. It's profound,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know who said that.
It is a popular British writer from the 80s, 90s. Her name is Hilary Mantel. She passed, oh gosh, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago
All right.
at the age of 70, but she was a writer. But anyway, I love that quote.
Yeah.
It's I do think it's profound as well. That you know, if you're going to love, you take a risk, and the loss and the price of loss is grief.
It's true. Wise man once said, "What is grief but love everlasting?"
Hmm. Who said that?
I think it was Vision, White Vision.
It was,
I'm not
yes,
sure.
from
Yeah.
WandaVision.
WandaVision. Yeah.
Yes, yeah,
Right.
yeah. I almost used that quote, but I was like, no.
Yeah.
Bob,
I'm looking
why?
forward to that show. I got to tell you, whenever it comes out.
Vision
I don't.
Quest.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know when it's coming out, but I'm
yeah, me
looking
too.
forward to it.
Yeah, WandaVision was great.
I enjoyed it immensely. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was well written. Great concept. Acting was good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, overall, loved the show.
Yeah.
But Bob, I
Yeah.
digress.
Yeah.
Why am I greeting you with a Hillary Mantel quote?
Oh God, is this one of those yarns on the wall sort of thing? Because we're covering Fallen Sun, the death of Captain America tonight, so it is a study in grief
There you
and
go.
on people's response to it. But
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And we'll talk more about that as we get into
all right.
that story tonight. But Bob, I haven't talked to you in a week. How you been?
Oh man, Rick, what a I don't know if you noticed on Facebook. And I might have mentioned this to you before. I started going to the gym
Yes. Well,
a few
you
weeks
did
ago.
mention that I guess a episode or two ago
Did
that you
I?
are
Yeah.
yep, that you're back at the gym. I've
Yeah.
seen or maybe I'm just thinking of other conversations we've had. But yeah, I see that you're going back to the gym. You shared a picture.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Post picture. Post
Hmm.
picture. Yeah. And yeah, I have been laboring under a misperception about how fit I was. I thought I was, oh, hell, I was in the Marines for 25 years. I'm sure I still got it.
Uh-huh.
I don't got it, Rick. I don't
No.
got it. So it's a long climb out of that deep, dark, dank hole.
As my
Uh,
mom would say, if you don't use it, you'll lose it
that's true. That's
as
true.
you get older.
So a lot of creaking and groaning.
Hmm.
So yeah. But
And
anyway,
not to mention what you did at the gym.
yeah, not to mention what I do at the gym. Right. Exactly. That's just in the bathroom. But yeah, so I mean it's we're on the third week now. So, over that
Hmm.
initial hump of soreness anyway, and
Hmm.
getting it done. So
Well, I'm proud of you. You
thank
know
you.
what?
Thank you.
It's all about creating that habit.
It is. It's always been that way.
So
So
I have a little funny story about the gym
all right.
that actually happened to me today. So I have two gyms I go to. I go to a fitness center that's a nationwide type of chain
Yeah.
type of thing. I do that twice a week because I'm signed up for like 8 classes a month. So
hmm
I do those usually Mondays and Fridays
Yeah.
because I work from home on those days.
Yeah.
And it's an hour class, and I burn like somewhere between 850 to 950 calories a class.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
a good class, right?
Yeah.
But when I go to work, they have a gym at work,
Yeah.
And so I go in the morning because I'm at the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I go in the morning and I'll just like run a mile, do some stretches, and
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 125, 140 calories or
Yeah.
something, but it's a good way to start the day.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, they have classes, and these are like 45-minute classes. And, there could be strength and conditioning. It could be, uh, it's like a hit type of class, whatever.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I find that I burn somewhere around 400 to 500 calories in these classes. So they're worth
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
And anyway, my boss, um, and also my new boss. So I have like two bosses right now, right? They both go to the gym as well. And it what happens is when you come in, you swipe your badge.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I get a little upset about this, is that as you know, I go in the morning and I go in the afternoon, right? So
Yeah.
that's like 6 classes a week or
Yeah.
6 times a week, but it
Right.
only counts as three. You only get one swipe a day. And I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
but, and they're like, yeah, well, it's only one swipe a day. So there's a leaderboard of
Yeah.
counting how many times people go to the gym.
Yeah.
And they have like a bronze, silver, gold type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they have everybody's names and how many times they've come into class. So it kind of gets you a little motivated. Like
Yeah.
I gotta beat that guy. I gotta go to the gym a little bit more often.
Yeah.
So we cut to today and they have April up. Now, I was on vacation the first week of April, so I didn't expect really to even
Yeah.
make the leaderboard, maybe bronze or something. But they listed me in gold with 18 visits. So I was like, oh, they must actually start counting my twice a day.
Yeah.
That's great. And I look for my boss A and I don't see him. And I look for my boss B and I don't see him. And they have as low as 6.
Yeah.
So anyway, probably not the smartest thing, but I take a picture of it and
Yeah.
I send a little chat to boss A and boss B, and I say, I send the picture, and oh, by the way, I put a little red arrow at my name
Yeah. Yeah.
at
Of course.
18,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm like in the top 10, whatever. And I was like, hey guys, I was looking at the leaderboard. You might want to get your badges checked because they're not registering every time you swipe. So my boss
Yeah.
A, who I've
Yeah.
had for 8.5 years, and he's a great guy. He his response was, yeah. Remind me again, when is the Zumba class?
Yeah.
So he was a little dig at my afternoon classes, I guess.
Right.
He does. I
Yeah.
guess he doesn't consider them real workouts.
Right. 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 Now, I know you are let's just be frank. You're a very competitive person.
I like to compete, but I
Yes.
don't have to win.
Okay.
I
So,
am competitive in the fact that I like competition, but
yeah.
it's like if I lose, it's okay. It's not the end of the world.
All right. So, are you competitive in the gym?
And like if I see somebody else, I got to run faster than
Oh
them.
yeah, you gotta I got a little bit faster. I gotta like put a little more weight on. That sort of
Okay,
stuff.
in a way. So
Yeah.
so when I'm on the treadmill at like the Monday Friday thing, and I'm
Yeah.
on the treadmill, and the person next to me
Yeah.
is going at a higher click,
Yeah.
I don't have to be better than them, but it does
Yeah.
motivate me. It
Yeah.
does motivate
Okay.
me. Like,
All
okay,
right.
I got to bring my A game. This person's bringing their A game.
All right.
I got to
That's a
notch it
nice way
up.
to
I'm
put it.
gonna,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
In
All
that
right.
regard, yeah.
All right. All right.
So,
See,
what happens to you at the gym?
well, you see, I'm not competitive at all
Uh-huh.
in pretty much any walk of life, except when I walk into the gym, and which is a problem. And so, but I outsmarted myself this time. And so I looked at a lot of gyms. Like I looked at a lot of the national chains. And there's a couple right around me. I looked at the university, but it was a bit too far, and I'm only there for like 1 or 2 days a week. So it was cheap, but great fitness center. So I ended up selecting one of the county's fitness centers in the regional parks that we have here. And it's a nice center. But I checked it out first, and it's full of senior citizens. So, like, I am killing it at the gym. At least when I go, it's like it's like a sea of white hair. So I'm like, oh yeah, bring it on, Grandpa. So yeah, so I got like the best of both worlds, right? I can be competitive without hurting myself, which is obviously what I would do if I was at one of these big national chain
Yeah.
fitness centers. Like
Yeah,
I'd be like, no. And my wife was like, dude, just go to the one around the corner, sign up for that. And I'm like, I'm not going there. It's full of like 18 to 20-year-olds, jacking the bar up. And I'm like, I don't need that. So
yeah, trust me. I am definitely when I go to the Monday, Friday classes, I am definitely in the, let's just say top third age.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so to the point where sometimes I'm like, okay, am I just a dirty old man? Like, like
a little, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, but here's something crazy. Ready for this?
Yeah.
My son, who's an actor,
Right.
he's between gigs, so he decided, well, as I'm auditioning, I need money coming in, so he went and got his certification to be a fitness instructor at my gym.
Yeah.
And it took him a couple of months. I mean, it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And he got that. And so for the last maybe 6 months, he's been a fitness instructor there. So I sometimes take his classes. And sometimes like if I do the Friday morning 7:30 class, he'll be like, I'll go with you, Dad. And then he and I are next to each other on the treadmill.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to book, and my son, he turns 25 in June.
Yeah.
So and also, by the way, he's like 6 inches taller than me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So he's got the longer stride.
Yeah.
So I'm like trying my ass, like trying to keep up with my 25-year-old son.
Yeah.
And
I signed my son up, just actually this weekend for the same gym, but I made it very clear that we're deconflicting workout times.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because one, he'll make fun of me, and two, I'll try to keep up with him, and I'll end up hurting myself. So, gotta keep them separated.
He'll make fun of you. What is he? Doesn't like your leggings or something?
Oh yeah. He doesn't. My terry cloth headband.
Yeah.
Wristbands.
Yeah.
That's right. All that stuff. Yeah. So, anyway, that's it. That's where I am workout wise. So I know all the listeners were eager to hear more. So
I know, riveted, right? All right, sorry about that, listeners. So Bob, we are celebrating. If you're listening to this on the day it comes out, which is May 27th of May 28th, we got a birthday to celebrate, Mr. Scott Koblish. You remember Scott?
I do. Yeah, we talked to him a long time ago.
A long time ago. It's actually been 3 years. Hard to believe, but yeah. Scott, who is an artist and both a penciler and an inker, and he was the inker for Ron Garney back in the Mark Waid Captain America issues. He also penciled the Captain America Taco Bell giveaway. Remember that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I own a page from that, Rick.
I know you do.
I'm like, what a treasure.
Yeah. And Scott was a great guest on the show. If you want to check that out, go to episode 139, which came out June of 2023. So wow, 3 years ago. You can listen to that. But anyway, happy birthday, Scott.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good man.
Yeah. All right, so Bob, today we are doing a recap. And a recap is a little different than a lot of our, panel by panel dramas that we do. And I call them dramas because we act out the voices and sound effects and go through the stories, and you get to kind of do like an old time radio kind of thriller type of thing. But we're not doing that today. No, today is a recap where we actually explain what's going on in the comic, describe it to you, and then talk about how our thoughts on it. And we tend to do that with something that maybe several issues. So Fallen Sun is a 5-issue story, that came out in 2007. And the reason we picked this is because if everything goes according to plan, we're going to have the writer here next episode. We're going to have Jeph Loeb, Bob.
Yeah, that's big, Rick. Big, big, big.
Yeah.
And two of the most beloved, I think, Cap involved stories. This 5-issue miniseries, but also White.
Captain
So,
America White.
yeah,
We did with Tim Sale.
yeah.
Yeah. I noticed you left out volume 2 with Rob Liefeld, where Jeph wrote that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's beloved by some folks.
Yeah.
It had very creative. Let's just call it what it is, right? I mean, it gets some bad press, but it was very, very creative. Like a lot of Jeff's stuff, it takes things in new directions and throws twists at you that like maybe you didn't anticipate. And certainly some of them were hit, some of them were miss, but it was a valiant effort on volume 2.
Yeah, and he also wrote Cap. He did like for the Ultimate Universe. So he did like the Ultimate Captain America Annual. He did that.
Yeah.
He wrote Cap in Ultimates 3 and Ultimatum and New Ultimates. So that he has that version of Cap if you like that as well. But yeah, Jeph, gosh, he is a writer and a producer for TV and for film. For TV, he did a lot of comic book stuff, like Marvel's Agents of Shield and Jessica Jones and Luke Cage from Netflix. He did Smallville. He did Legion. He also was a producer for Lost, and he did some movies as well with Arnold Schwarzenegger's Commando. So anyway, big big name guest. Can't wait to talk with him next week, and we will obviously reference some of the things that we want to ask him as we go through Fallen Sun today. And Bob, I would be remiss if I didn't say we've got some serious guests coming up over the next several months.
Yeah, well, you've been working overtime, Rick, pulling on these threads that have been hanging out there for, in some cases, years. Really, you're bringing them home. So well done there.
Well, I appreciate that. It's a labor of love, but we do appreciate all of our patrons who help support the show and keep us going. And actually, our patrons, one of the perks they get is they get to find out who our guests are ahead of time and have the ability to ask a question and submit their question for the guest that we'll read. So we've already started to get some questions being sent in for Jeph Loeb. But if you're interested in becoming a patron, you want to support the show, you want cool perks too, please check out at buymeacoffee.com/Cap Comic Fans for more information on how to sign up. I think it's $5 a month and you're a Shield Slinger level and you get a ton of perks. So highly appreciated if you do become a patron. We really do appreciate you.
Coffee not included.
Oh, I see what you did there.
It was the
but it was buy me a coffee.
It's the legal disclaimer. So there's no coffee involved. So
okay. Yeah. It's I think they're like it's like the price of buying a cup of coffee.
It really is. It is. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to buy me a coffee?
And you don't want to stand in line anyway. So just send us the money.
Bob, when you are you a coffee drinker?
I am, Rick.
I
am.
When you go, do you go to places and order a special coffee?
I don't. I used to when I was younger. I spent a lot of time at coffee houses. It was like my second home, hanging out in the coffee house, reading, writing, thinking.
What name did you give them? But they wrote on your cup.
I didn't. No, I just gave them my own name. But man, I missed that. I have a coffee mug that my wife bought me 25 years ago, from the East Village Coffee House, which no longer exists in Monterey. And I love that coffee mug. But I don't have time for that now. So, and, there's not that many independent ones. I really like the independent ones. Not many around here where I live. And so I have my one cup of coffee in the morning. I get up early before everyone else, make my coffee, and I sit on the couch and stare at the wall and drink my coffee.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that's just one a day. That's it.
That's it. This is my one a day.
All right.
Yeah.
What happens on a day you don't have it?
It doesn't really have that big of an impact on me. It's not like I get a blinding headache anymore because, it's
Mm-hmm.
just one cup of coffee, but I do miss it. I just, as you said, it's a routine, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
habit for me. And just having
Mm-hmm.
that morning routine and get my stuff done in the morning, feed the cats, take care of stuff, have my cup of
Mm-hmm.
coffee before everyone gets up. I got to do that, man. Or all
I
my
hear you.
day is thrown off.
I'm the same way if I don't get my mimosa.
There you go. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Dang, we're out of champagne.
Should we get to the comic?
Yeah, that's good.
All right. All right. So we're going to cover Fallen Sun, Captain, or I think it's, what is the title of this? It's,
The death of Captain America.
yeah, Fallen Sun, the Death of Captain America. So then the reason I'm, I joke, what the title is because when this came out, I did have a comic book store back in the day in Atlanta, and this was around the time, obviously, of the Captain America 25 by Ed Brubaker and Steve Epting, which was the death of Captain America. And that had a release date of March 7th of 2007. And it was a big surprise. It was a big secret. Yet they have to write and create the comics that come after that, and they have to solicit them. So, as a comic shop owner, I get the catalog and I go through the catalog a couple of months before the comics come out. Like I have to go through them, I review them, I place my order, they then take my order, they they print them, they publish them, they distribute them. It's a process, right? It takes
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And so they couldn't come out and say the title was Fallen Sun, the Death of Captain America. So instead, at the time, they just called it Civil War Fallen Sun and
Okay.
then dash Spider-Man. Civil War Fallen Sun dash Wolverine. Like that's how they
Yeah.
refer
Yeah.
to these series of
Okay.
one shots.
Yeah.
And so this was in, I want to say the March catalog and the April catalog, because the April catalog comes out in March, right? And so, they couldn't publish those and say that what was actually happening, the death of Captain America.
Yeah.
Because Captain America 25 came out March 7th, Fallen Sun #1 came out April 4th,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then #2 came out April 25th. And then #3 came out May 16th. So all those catalogs, like we just didn't know.
Yeah.
So that was #1, what was going on in the comic shop at the time. So um, how the story came about, or the title and how Jeph Loeb got involved, is back in December, where they have like this little, editorial and writer and creator kind of retreat talking about the following year, like what the big projects are going to be. And, Tom Brevoort is like, the big editor at the time. And they're going through this, and they reveal that, all right, well, Captain America's dying in 25 after Civil War. And, we want to do a story that is the Marvel Universe's reaction to Captain
Uh-huh.
America
Yeah.
dying, and focusing on the major, like, characters and their reactions. And so J. Michael Straczynski said, well, we should do this based on um, the five stages of grief.
Okay. Yeah. Kubler Ross.
And so uh, the way the story goes, when JMS spoke, everybody listened. I think Jeph Loeb, maybe it was him, I'm not sure, referred to it as like, it was like JMS is Moses, and we're and you know the and
Yeah.
you know, the burning bush, and like we're all just like okay. And so everybody agreed it was a great idea, and right away Jeph Loeb said, "I want to write it," and started coming up with ideas about it. Now, keep in mind, this was less than 2 years after his son, Sam, who was only 17 years old, um, passed away from cancer. And so Jeph was very experienced in the whole 5 stages of grief.
Right. Yeah.
And he was like, I want to do it. And he actually was like, and the story should be called Fallen Son, and which has a very personal, um, you know,
Sure.
connection
Yeah.
for Jeph.
Yeah. 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 Wow. That's that's a cool story, Rick. Uh, and well, as we're going to find out, it's a powerful series, and knowing the background of it just gives it that little extra meaning.
Yeah. So that's what we're covering today. We're covering the story behind, or we're calling the story of the reaction of the Marvel Universe
Yeah.
to Captain America's death. Um, and so with the recap, I think Bob, you're going to take issues 1, 3, and 5,
Yeah.
and I'm going to take 2 and 4. So let's start with the creators. Now we mentioned the writer, which is Jeph Loeb, and he actually during this retreat was pitching like the different creators that or different artists
Yeah.
that he wanted to have join him. And so he was like, oh, well, at the time he was working on Wolverine, and the artist at that time was Lanil Francis Yu.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was like, let's get him to do the Wolverine issue. It just makes total sense.
Yeah.
And so the one that you're covering, so we have Jeph Loeb as the writer, Lanil Yu as the penciler and inker, Dave McCraig as the colorist, and Richard Starkings the letterer, and then Bill Roseman the editor. Um, Lanil Yu did the cover, and do you want to take the listeners through it?
Yeah. So, just briefly, the covers have a certain framed look, right? So the covers are black with a sort of a cutout in the middle of it. And above it, of course, the title is Fallen Son, The Death of America. And then there's an inverted flag box. So, most folks who know a veteran or are a veteran will have seen these before, these triangular boxes with a glass front that encase a flag that has flown as a memorial flag in honor of somebody. And then they generally present it to the deceased, or the deceased family, I should say. And or when you retire, I've got one just like the one depicted on the cover here, but that is inverted behind the Fallen Son, Death of Captain America logo. And then in that box, we've got Wolverine, and he's standing in front of Cap's shield, which is hung on a wall, and it's got a bunch of its paint scraped off it in various locations. But Wolverine is not looking happy, and he's got his claws extended and pointed upward, and he's got probably about a dozen or 2 dozen bullet holes in his chest, and they're still smoking. And he's got a very fierce look on his face. So he is definitely angry, and he's letting the world know it.
Did you mention the stogie?
I did not mention the stogie. Yeah. Yeah. He's got a stogie right in his mouth.
And I should also mention that Jeph Loeb had also worked with Michael Turner, very famous popular artist at that time, and he did all the variant covers for Fallen Son as well.
Yeah.
And he also, I think, did variant covers for Civil War, which was, the big mini series before this. Bob, would you like me to read the solicitation?
I would. Yeah.
Okay. Because again, they had to keep it mysterious, right? How will Wolverine react to the death of one of the most beloved characters in the Marvel Universe? He ain't buying it. Join Logan as he tries to track down the truth, and he's not going to be happy when he does. The secret story that will transverse the post Civil War landscape and stars Marvel's most popular characters begins here. How do people with amazing powers face a force that no one can fight? Who has fallen? And is more violence coming? With Wolverine on the scene, is there any question? Be there as superstar Jeph Loeb teams with the industry's top artists on a story that will have everyone talking. Loeb, Lanil, Logan.
Well, it caught my attention. I would
Yeah.
have ordered it for sure. All right. Well, Rick, we opened this story with an abandoned storefront. It's Sam's Barbershop on the Lower East Side of New York City. Fans of S.H.I.E.L.D. will, of course, be familiar with Sam's Barbershop, although I think when it originally debuted back in Strange Tales 136, it might have been in Midtown Manhattan. But in any case, we hear some voices coming from inside Sam's Barbershop, which is boarded up and trash strewn around outside of it. And we hear, "I don't buy it," and that's Wolverine, and we see the Winter Soldier's mechanical arm, and he's messing around with something. And the two of these guys they're debating whether Cap is actually dead or not. Wolverine's in a bit of denial. Let's just say that. And he thinks that maybe Nick Fury is up to one of his shenanigans again, some deception, some conspiracy or something. And Bucky tells him, "No, I was there. I saw Cap felled by the bullets." He has no doubt that Cap is dead and gone. But Wolverine, he persists, making the case that Cap and Bucky too, he adds, have histories of appearing to be killed only to show up later. And there's this really great double page splash of the Winter Soldier and Wolverine inside of Sam's barbershop. And Wolverine's using a piece of broken glass in one of his claws to shave. And Bucky's sitting in one of the barber chairs. I've always wanted a barber chair, Rick. One of my neighbors has one in his garage, and I'm like so super jealous. I always wanted one of these. But so Bucky's sitting in the barber's chair, and he's kind of messing around with the levers and stuff. And he mentions the fact that this is the storied Sam's Barbershop of old that used to be the covert front end to the S.H.I.E.L.D. underground headquarters. It was run by Sam the Barber, codenamed Charlie Clipper, and it was eventually decommissioned. And you probably remember that back in Captain America 228. Although it did open again for business in Volume 3. In any case, Bucky's messing around with the controls, wondering aloud, what it was like back in the day, when suddenly the floor opens up underneath him and that chair goes whoosh down through the hole. And of course, Logan's like, "Soldier!" And he jumps down to try to help Bucky out. And he asks him, "You okay, kid?" And Bucky's just sprawled out on the ground, of course. And he says, "Stop calling me kid." And Wolverine starts to, reminisce a little bit about, well, that's when I met you. You were a kid, sort of thing. And we get this great flashback sequence of Bucky and Cap on that drone that ultimately led to their apparent demise back in World War II. And that kind of flashback gets Wolverine thinking about the fact that there have been times when we thought Captain America was gone before, and it turned out not to be true. And Bucky can't really fault that logic. And he asks, "Well, what do you want from me?" And Wolverine suggests, of course, the obvious solution. What are you going to do if you think you're not sure if somebody's passed away? You're going to want to see the body, right? And so that's what he proposes. He wants to go up to see the body. And keep in mind, the body is up in the helicarrier, with Commander Hill and Director Stark. And they're not on the good side here, right? Or I should say on the legal side, Wolverine and Bucky. They're both allied with the Resistance. And so it's not just a matter of traipsing up there and checking out the body. So Bucky's like, no, not just no, but sort of a hell no. And he says he's got his own agenda. But he does, he leaves on this note. He says, if you do see Steve, say hello for me. And that just, goes to show what this idea of grief, particularly in that first stage of grief. And the title for this book is Denial. That hope has a tendency to spring eternal, in the midst of grief, right? That is that first flowering of denial that this actually hasn't happened, and it must be a dream, or there's some mistake or something.
Bob, can I address that real quick?
Yeah.
Because again, the mystery behind, like, they didn't want to reveal Cap was dead when they were doing it. The title to this one at the time was not Denial. That kind of, I think, got shared later, especially when they started referencing them in the past tense. It was like, oh, it's the denial issue, it's the anger issue, and so on. But I personally, like, I didn't see denial somewhere on the cover or in the title page or anything like that. Did you?
Not on the hard copy. No.
Yeah. So I think that was one of those things that like, it's very subtle.
Yeah.
So if in each one of these issues, because it is the 5 stages of grief, the Kubler-Ross, right? So you have denial, anger,
bargaining, right?
Bargaining, and then depression, and then acceptance, right?
Yeah.
Jeph has the characters mention those qualities somewhere in the story in each one of these.
Very subtle indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we turn the page and we arrive on the next scene, and it's a Hell's Kitchen, New York City. We're looking at the skyline, and then we get this like amazing 3/4 splash of Daredevil patrolling along the city rooftops. And I know you love this 3/4 splash, because we get to see about 8 different positions in the sequence of Daredevil somersaulting through the air from rooftop to rooftop as he's proceeding on his patrol. And he notes how quiet everything is, right? It's like New York City has just gone into shock because of what has happened, and nothing is going on outside. And we turn the page and we see this amazing double page splash of Wolverine just lunging at Daredevil with his hands extended in front of his body, with all his claws out. And Daredevil is able to just twist out of the way in time to escape those claws. And it's amazing, because you got the whole sky above them with all the stars and all of the pigeons that have been shocked by this disturbance taking flight behind them. It's really an amazing it's an amazing piece of art. And Wolverine, basically explains his arrival. He wanted to make sure that this was the actual Daredevil and not one of those guys running around in Daredevil's costume as we saw in Civil War. And he goes on to explain that he's got this plan. He wants to verify that Cap is in fact dead by getting a look at the body. And again, he points out the body's on S.H.I.E.L.D.'s helicarrier, but he thinks Daredevil's particular skills, his ability to sense things, would be helpful in seeing past any of the deception that S.H.I.E.L.D. or S.H.I.E.L.D.'s agents might throw up in the way. And Daredevil says to him, people die, Logan. You, more than most of us, should know that. And Logan's had his brush with death before, right? Jean Grey, and of course, Mariko Yahisa. And so he knows what this is all about. But Daredevil's like, okay, all right, but how are we going to get aboard the helicarrier? And Logan says, I got a guy. If you're hanging out with your ride or die, Rick, and someone says, I got a guy, that's time to go home. Right? Because it's not going to work out as planned.
I don't want to meet the guy.
Right. So now we're at scene 3, right? We turn the page on scene 3 and we see the helicarrier, the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. It's 10,000 feet above New York City. It's being escorted by a dozen or so, fighter jets. And we see Commander Hill and Director Stark, and they're arguing on one of the flight decks. And it sounds like Stark's got somebody in custody, and he wants to wring the truth out of him. He's got this sense that perhaps Red Skull was behind this whole thing. And Hill's reminding him that, which is ironic, Hill's reminding him that, these guys have due process rights. So you can't hold them forever. Meanwhile, in the shadows, what we see is Daredevil and Wolverine. And so you're probably wondering how they got up here on the helicarrier. And it turns out the guy they got is Doctor Strange, who is also present there in his astral form. And he says, this is how I got you up here. I got you up here through a teleporting spell. And now you've been enchanted for invisibility, but it's only going to last for 10 minutes. So you got to hustle. So you would think that they're going to immediately hustle down to see Cap's body and verify that's in fact him. But Wolverine makes a bit of a detour. And he heads down to the holding cell. And who's in the holding cell, Rick? But none other than Crossbones, who immediately thinks to himself, "Are you here to do me?" Right? Because he knows the idea of vengeance. So when he sees Daredevil and Wolverine, he thinks that's probably the end of the line. But Wolverine and Daredevil enter, and Wolverine basically lays a pistol down in front of Crossbones and begins to interrogate him, needling him, trying to get information out of him. And Crossbones is like, "Yeah, I shot him," but like his wasn't the killing shot. And he doesn't know who did the killing shot. And it seems he doesn't remember much. But Daredevil's like, I think he's telling the truth that he doesn't really know much else other than what he's telling you. But Wolverine isn't letting up, right? And he's continuing to push and push and push. And Daredevil can hear his heartbeat and knows he's telling the truth, but Crossbones is getting agitated. And so he finally gets to the point where Crossbones has had enough. He picks up the handgun and he shoots several rounds into Wolverine's chest. And of course, it does very little damage to Wolverine because he's going to heal right away. But Wolverine takes that as his opportunity for vengeance, right? He got him to do what he wanted him to do, and now he feels like he can, use self-defense to take out Crossbones. And he uses his claws all right on both sides of Crossbones' neck, but Daredevil stops him and says, "That's it. I'm out of here. You can't kill him." And he leaves. And Wolverine realizes, okay, he's wounded. Crossbones is wounded. Let's go see Cap's body. But Daredevil takes off, and Wolverine has to proceed on his own. He finds his way down to where the body is being held in a casket. It's flag draped, as you would expect, and he slowly opens it. Oddly enough, he sniffs, because he's got heightened senses as well, at least in that realm. And he wants to know if this is in fact a real body, presumably, and not like an LMD or something. And we can't see Cap's face. We don't see Steve's face, but we do see him laying in the casket, dressed in his Class A Army uniform. And his face is in the shadows. And Wolverine doesn't say anything. He just stands there looking down at the body. But then we see Iron Man behind him, just the lights of his eyes and his mouth. And he says, "That's why you came here, isn't it? To make sure." And as soon as they passed their 10 minutes, they popped up on the internal alarms. And of course, that's how they found out where they were. And Iron Man and Hank Pym is there as well, in his yellow jacket, but in his large size. And Wolverine says, "Okay, I see the shield isn't here. What's going on?" Right? He's dead, but you got the shield. What are you up to, Iron Man? Like, what do you have planned? Yellow Jacket Pym wants to arrest Wolverine, and Iron Man, Tony says, "We're going to let him go because he needs to go back and he needs to tell everybody else who is holding out hope that in fact, Cap is dead." And Wolverine departs. But before he does so, he says that, "If I find out that you had anything to do with Cap's death, I will kill you." And that's the end of that issue.
Oof. Yeah, I think for us Cap fans, that was not an easy issue because we were holding out hope. And at least at this point, it felt like, okay, like, no, this is legit. He's dead. Here's the body. He's
Yeah,
passing the test. Yeah.
yeah, and there's a couple things too, right? I mean, interesting choice, like, Wolverine, right? That Wolverine is the guy who needs to know, right? It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
Bucky, right? It wasn't Sam. Wolverine was the guy that they chose for this first issue that needed to know. And they've had a complicated relationship, Steve and Logan, throughout the years. That's number one. I thought was an interesting creative choice. And the other one is the fact that they had him in his Army Class A's instead of his Captain America uniform in the casket. Also, another interesting choice, and presumably, of course, dressed by Shield. I've been in these situations before, Rick. We
Mm-hmm.
dress them, the killed in action, make sure that they've got their Class A uniform on. So I understand, that process, right? But there are conscious choices made about, what uniform, what awards, all that to make sure that, it's for eternity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was an interesting choice that Director Stark made to put him in his Class A's, I thought, and not in his Captain America uniform.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I want to address what you said about it's interesting that they picked Wolverine instead of Sam or Bucky. Um, and I think in a previous interview, Jeph Loeb said that the reason he went with Wolverine was because, like, if Wolverine can accept this, then anybody should, because he's very cynical,
Yeah, right.
and he's
Yeah,
he has the senses, and um so I think, if you I think he said if you can convince Wolverine, you can convince the world.
right. Yeah, and he's no nonsense, right?
Right.
He's
Hmm.
not swayed by emotion or sentimentality or any of
Right.
those things. He's all about business.
All right, so let's get
Yeah.
to issue 2 of Fallen Sun, Death of Captain America. And this one is later referred to as Anger. And it is Jeph Loeb, but the artist that he picked for this one was his Superman Batman team of Ed McGuinness and Dexter Vines. The colorist is Jason Keith, which is interesting as a different colorist. They didn't keep that going, but it is the same letterer and same editor. The release date on this one was April 25th, and cover date of June. I will get to the solicitation for this one. The devastating end of Civil War has 2 decidedly different reactions from the mighty Avengers and the new Avengers. If you thought heroes were divided during the war, just wait until the aftermath. That's right. It's both teams in one book, and we got the superstar team from Superman Batman, Jeph Loeb and Ed McGuinness, to take on Earth's mightiest heroes, and the Avengers assemble like never before. So on the cover here, you have, I don't know, it's a little cheesecakey for my liking because of the tone and the subject matter of this book. But you have that same trade dress that you described, and you have the inner picture, and you have that same bloodied shield in the background. But in the foreground, you have 2 female characters wearing, what type of costumes would you call those?
They are skin tight.
Skin tight.
Yeah.
And you have on the left, you have Spider Woman, later to be revealed as the Skrull Spider Woman. And on the right, you have Miss Marvel. And they both look pretty ticked off. And they also look to be ready for action and to take on any bad guy at the time. So we open this up, and I've struggled with how to represent this story, Bob, to the listeners. So I decided I'm going to do this in two different stories, unlike the way Jeph had written it and Ed and Dexter illustrated it, because there's two stories congruently going on at the same time to show how the new Avengers, which is the team that is, as you pointed out, they are illegal. This is the team that Cap was leading. And then the Mighty Avengers, which is a new series that came out that Frank Cho was doing the art at the time, and Brian Michael Bendis was writing. And that's the team that Iron Man was leading, or maybe Miss Marvel. I can't remember. But anyway, it was Iron Man's team, essentially. And so the panels on the page go back and forth between these two stories to show them happening in real time. It would be very confusing, I think, to
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of go through that. So
Hmm.
I'm going to pick these two stories and cover them one at a time. So it starts with the Mighty Avengers. So that's where I'll kick off, and then I'll go through the Mighty Avengers story, and then I'll go with the New Avengers story. After Wolverine and Daredevil infiltrate the Shield helicarrier, so Iron Man contacts the Mighty Avengers, who are en route to prevent the supervillain Tiger Shark from attacking a coastal missile base. And Tiger Shark has stolen an item called the Horn of Gabriel. And this is it's from Atlantis, and it can summon like these sea monsters from the depths of the ocean to come to him. And so he's got that, and so we see Iron Man kind of giving the lowdown to the team. Now the team that we see here, we have Miss Marvel, who is flying the Quinjet. We have um, behind her as passengers, you have Wasp, you have Black Widow, you have Simon Williams Wonder Man, and you have Ares. Now, if you know anything about Ares, he's like the god of war, and he's pretty miserable, and he just wants to fight all the time. And then we have a hologram projection of Tony Stark in his Iron Man uniform addressing the team. And so they're going and eventually have to call Avengers Assemble, Miss Marvel. And we see Tiger Shark with his um, Horn of Gabriel calling it out, and sea creatures rising from the ocean. And we see the Avengers going off to fight them. And it's interesting because they're not going about it like business like. There's definitely, there's some fierceness about this, some anger about them. And let's face it, Miss Marvel is known to become angry at times. So she goes up and she, nails Tiger Shark while the others go after the gigantic, let's just say, Godzilla-sized creatures, right?
Yeah.
Coming out of the ocean, and they're fighting that while um, Ms. Marvel is going up against Tiger Shark. And it turns out Tiger Shark, he basically is doing this because he wants to get respect. He feels that he deserves, and Ms. Marvel's furious. And so she savagely beats him. One of the characters that was missing from this description that I left out was the Sentry. Now, the Sentry is like God, like Superman like powers, right? Like
Yeah.
he's like one of the mightiest characters on the earth. But he wasn't there because he had therapy. And if you know anything about the Sentry, you know that he has a split personality. And so you don't want to mess with that. If he needs his therapy, you should give him his therapy, because the bad side of the Sentry, the Void, you don't want him to show up. So everybody's like, all right, we'll handle this without that Sentry. But I say that to tell you that at a pivotal moment, saving Black Widow's life, the Sentry shows up, just grabs this gigantic Godzilla-sized creature and just tosses it, you know, um, to the other side of the planet. Um, but Also happening at this time is uh, Miss Marvel just beats Tiger Shark senseless. And at that moment, Namor, the Submariner, shows up and basically warns the Mighty Avengers um, that they need to stop. He will take Tiger Shark. He will grab the Horn of Gabriel, and he will answer to Atlantis Justice. And if the Avengers retaliate, um, then there would be problems. At this point, Ares asks Miss Marvel if they won, and if so, that's all that mattered.
It's a great scene, right? That scene where Namor shows up because he calls him out that like
Yeah.
the way they treated Tiger Shark and the way they treated these ocean beasts were uh, beyond the line, and they're taking their anger out about losing Captain America on others, and he sees right through it.
Mm-hmm. He does. So that was split with this other story going on at the same time. But to your point, Bob, like it is the anger of these characters who they're just not happy right now with losing Cap. So they're taking out on the next available opponent. So now we cut to what's going on with the new Avengers, which are hiding out because they are on the bad side of the law. And you see Thing in a trench coat and hat because, if you see that, you're not worried that the trench coat hat hides everything, right? And he ends up going up to the mysterious base of the new Avengers. He goes in. He's greeted by Wong, who is the longtime companion and aide to Doctor Strange, but Doctor Strange is sitting there and he's looks like he's in astral form, but he's kind of meditating and sleeping because if you know from the first issue, it was a big strain on him to hide Wolverine and Daredevil on the helicarrier. So Thing he shows up and he's basically joining a poker game that is organized by the new Avengers, and also the young Avengers are there, Patriot and Hawkeye. And this is in the Sanctum Sanctorum, and tensions are running high. The conversation soon turns to Cap's death and the recent events caused by the Civil War, and sensing how things are kind of close to boiling over. Patriot and Hawkeye, the new Hawkeye, leave the game to go take out their frustrations um, on some bad guys. Just as the same time, Wolverine returns from his quest aboard the Shield helicarrier. So now you have Thing, you have Power Man, Luke Cage, you have Iron Fist, Danny Rand, you have Spider Woman, and you have Spider Man, Peter Parker, in his black costume, and then there's an empty chair there. So Wolverine shows up and he goes to take the empty chair, but Spider-Man is not having it, and he's not very happy with this. So the two of them kind of get into a little bit of an argument, and then there's this big splash page of Spider-Man taking Wolverine, grabbing him by his costume on the chest, lifting him up, and saying, shut up, just shut up." And Wolverine pops his claws and says, "Get your hands off me." And Spider Man punches him. And uh, Wolverine says, "I've seen one dead body tonight. Do you want to go for two?" And he about goes after him with his claws, but Thing comes between the two and says, "All right, knock it off." And he sees what's happening. And he basically says, "Look, fighting each other is not going to alleviate either of their pain regarding the loss of someone like Cap." And Spider-Man basically says, "All right, well, you know, I I got to get home," and he leaves. And then Wolverine decides to follow after him to shadow him to make sure that he gets home safe, while the others just simply decide to resume playing rather than discuss it any further. And that is the end to number two.
Man, I love that. I love that Logan's going to shadow Peter Parker home, make sure he gets there okay. Even after that dust up, right?
Yeah, it shows he cares.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Friends can, friends and brothers, they can get into fights and, have at each other, but at the end of the day, they still care about one another. And that just goes to show that Wolverine he's got a kind, caring soul there, amongst all that gruff.
Right. Yeah.
But I like this story. I like the story, in the fact that, it shows how different people deal with anger.
Right.
And, sometimes it's just to avoid it, like with a poker game. But it still bubbles up because, and that's the thing, Bob, right? Like we talk about like the Kubler-Ross stages of grief. And maybe I'll pause here for a minute and talk about this. Um, because we've all been through something in our life that has been that, whether we've lost someone close to us, whether it's been another tremendous loss of another kind, whether it be a divorce or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And we've all gone through at some point, depending on how old you are, the 5 stages of grief. And, you know, it's not linear,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
There's certainly people have the ability to, like deal with it in different ways. And I think this particular story shows how people are dealing with their anger in different ways. Um, I once had, when I was going through a tough time and I was talking with a therapist, they explained to me that the 5 stages of grief are kind of like a spiral staircase. And as you are going up the staircase in that spiral manner, you are going through stage one, stage two, stage three, stage four, stage five. And it's not like, okay, then you're done. You may go through that same 5 steps a second, a third, a fourth time. But as you are going up the stairs and getting further and further away from the cause, it's less and less and less each time. So you may go through anger more than once. You may go through acceptance more than once. And I felt, you have to live it to really
Yeah.
truly appreciate it and
Yeah.
understand it. But I was like, absolutely, it took some time to realize, but absolutely, she was right.
Yeah. Yeah. Another important takeaway from this issue in particular, exactly as you described, they're dealing with it in different ways and it's manifesting in different ways. And we hear this all the time, right? We know it from experience that you cannot judge another person's journey through grief, right? Because people manifest it differently, they deal with it differently, they express it differently. And you just because somebody may not be acting in the way that you anticipate that they should be acting in grief doesn't mean that they're not processing it in their own way. And we fall for that all the time, right? Because we expect other people to act like we would act in a similar situation.
Sure.
And so this particular issue, I think, does a really nice job illustrating how different people act in different ways under the similar situation.
All right. So now we get to number 3, and I will read the solicitation. Are you ready?
Yeah.
How has the fallout of Civil War affected Captain America? I think that's a loaded question. One side won and the other side lost. but the aftermath may have hit some heroes harder than others. Now it's time to navigate this turbulent new landscape with the shield slinging super soldier. And your guides are none other than Jeph Loeb and John Romita Jr. So this had a release date of May 16th, 2007, and a cover date of July. Bob, why don't you take us through the cover? And
yeah. So an odd cover, right? Because, well, Captain America, anybody who's picking up this issue by now knows that Captain America is dead. And yet here we see Captain America on the cover, Rick. And so we see the same format as the previous two covers, with that cutout in the center with the shield hanging on the wall, blood spatters on it. But on this cover, we see Captain America before the shield, but he's kind of in an odd pose. It's almost as if he has, he's in a fighting crouch, but almost like he's been knocked back against the shield. And he's got a look of grim determination on his face. And of course, he's got those pouches, which I love. But it's a stirring cover, particularly at this point when this book came out, because we know what the stakes have been.
Yeah. It's almost like it was almost a tease, because like Cap's back. This one's focused on Captain America. He's back.
Right. Why else would they call this Captain America, right? So the previous one was the Avengers, and one before that was Wolverine. This one's Captain America. Surely he's back.
Yeah.
It was a ruse.
Yeah, we're about to find out. Why don't you take us through it, Bob?
Yeah. So, when we open this up to the first page, we see the street out in front of the destroyed Avengers mansion. It's still in ruins, Rick, following that Avengers disassembled story that we covered back in episode 289. And we see a lone figure walking along the sidewalk in front of that, 10, 12-foot wall out front of Avengers Mansion. And we see a newspaper blowing in the wind, and the headline of the Daily Bugle says Captain America assassinated. And then this figure, who we can barely make out, but he does seem to have a bow on his back. He pulls himself up over that wall, scales it, jumps down on the other side, and then immediately pulls an arrow from his quiver. And it has an explosive warhead on it, which he activates. He knocks it in his bow, and he fires it straight up in the air. And then what we see is a beautiful double-page splash of Iron Man hovering in the air, and he has caught that arrow. And he orders the trespasser to stop where he is. And boy, this trespasser looks familiar, Rick. And he identifies himself with the code Avengers Priority Code 191, username Trickshot. And he proceeds to say the password. And by God, this looks like it might be Hawkeye, Rick.
What?
Yeah, I know, right? Now, as you know, Hawkeye was killed back in Avengers 502, which we covered back in the Avengers Disassembled storyline. And we know that, he had since been brought back to life by Scarlet Witch in the House of M story, and then snuffed back out of existence. And then just a couple months before this story came out, of course, he came back to life a second time. In New Avengers 26. And here he is standing before us. So it's no wonder that Tony Stark is a little bit confused. Then he runs the complete scan on him, and my God, it matches up. It does appear to be Clint. And Clint charges right up to him as soon as Iron Man lands on the ground, and he starts interrogating him right away, that he wants to know what the heck happened to Captain America. So clearly he'd been monitoring what was going on with the Civil War, and he knew what happened to Captain America, and he wants answers. And how does Tony Stark reply to his old friend? Well, he gives him a right across the chin, and knocks him out. And we see the next scene up on the helicarrier, and Tony Stark is standing out front of a capsule of some sort of liquid, and Clint Barton is submerged upside down, and he's being thoroughly scanned to determine if, in fact, he is who he says he is. And Dr. Collette is there, and she says that, yeah, that's him, down to the last DNA strand. So they get him out of the tank, and Tony goes to meet him in a holding cell and explains that they had to be sure who he was.
Bob, was that the Bantha tank?
The back to tank.
Back
yeah,
to
that's
tank?
right.
Yeah.
It does look like a back to tank, doesn't it?
All right.
Yeah.
Star Wars. Mm-hmm.
Right. So funny little scene here, where Tony explains to Hawkeye that they checked every possible thing. And Clint says colonoscopy was a bit much. And Tony replies that they removed 2 polyps, which were benign. So, thank them later, sort of thing. And once again, Barton asks him, what happened to Steve? And Tony replies, he was assassinated. Steve Rogers is dead. And so the follow-up question, of course, from Clint is, well, what are you doing about it? And Stark says, come with me. I want to show you something. So Barton gets dressed, leads him down the hall to a room, and hanging on the wall is Captain America's shield. And Stark explains that this is the real deal. There's 2 others that he had made, one which would go to the Smithsonian, and the other which would be in the coffin and gets buried with Steve. So Barton says, what are you going to do with this one? And Stark asks him, do you want to take it for a spin? So they go up on the flight deck of the helicarrier, and Barton gets a chance to throw that shield around, and he's pretty good with it. In fact, he's really good with it. He's got the accuracy and the precision, and is able to catch it when it comes back to him. And Stark explains that they had, I think it was like 77 shield agents were playing around with it up on the helicarrier deck. 73 of them ended up in the hospital because they couldn't catch it. And 4 of them, well, let's just say they didn't make it, sort of thing, right? Hit them in the head. So it's not something that everybody could do. It takes a certain person to be able to throw that shield. And of course, Hawkeye says it's all about the accuracy.
So, Bob, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What's the name of the craft they're on?
The helicarrier.
Okay.
Why? What's wrong?
You've been calling it the helicarrier.
My mouth is dry, Rick.
No. It's like that Boston thing. It's like,
oh, is it?
It's the helicarrier.
Yeah. So anyway, Stark essentially proposes to Barton that he should become the next Captain America, and Clint's a little upset, right? I mean, Steve's not even in the ground yet, and Stark's already like coming up with schemes and dreams, in this case involving Barton, and Clint says there is no Captain America without Steve Rogers. And Stark rightfully, points out and reminds the former Hawkeye that he didn't always feel that way. And there's a great little half-page panel that shows modern day Clint Barton sort of with his head hung low, holding that shield. And then a really cool sort of 1960s version of the comics with Hawkeye in his uniform berating Captain America in front of an embarrassed Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, basically telling Cap that he could do his job any day of the week without that waiter's tray he carries on his arm. And you can tell from the expression on Barton's face here in this panel that he's embarrassed by his behavior back in the day. So, and Stark says, look, you haven't always felt that way. There were points where you thought you could do Cap's job, and you've been Hawkeye, you've been Goliath, you've been Ronin, all these sorts of things. And it seems like you've been looking for an identity for yourself. And maybe this is the opportunity for you to find that identity that you've been searching for. So we leave that scene and we go to the next scene, and it is downtown on 9th Avenue at a gas station, and Firebrand is there, and we see him trying to rob a gas station, and the Patriot and Kate Bishop Hawkeye are there, 2 of the Young Avengers, and they're engaging Firebrand, trying to take him into custody. Meanwhile, up on one of the rooftops high above them, we see Iron Man and Clint Barton. And Barton's like, who the heck are these guys supposed to be, right? Because obviously he doesn't know anything about the Young Avengers, and he certainly doesn't know anything about Kate Bishop in her particular Hawkeye garb. So the Patriot and Hawkeye Kate Bishop managed to apprehend Firebrand, and just then Iron Man arrives on scene, and he wants to actually apprehend these two young Avengers because, of course, they're in the resistance side of the superhero registration conflict. Because now Kate Bishop, I should say, fired a EMP arrow that has disabled Iron Man, causing his suit to shut down and him to crash into the ground. So he's kind of out of service for a minute as they flee to the sewer, and they're getting ready to go down a sewer where this shield starts ricocheting around them, and it's Captain America's shield. And they're like, "What the heck was that?" And they turn around, and who is standing there? Oh, and now we get the cover, Rick.
It's Captain America.
It's Captain America, right? But the face isn't quite right, because this is, in fact, Clint Barton wearing the Captain America costume, and he's wielding the shield. They know Captain America's dead, so of course they're like, "Who the heck is this guy? And who do you think you are, wearing this uniform and wielding this shield?" And of course Barton's like, "Well, who are you? You're calling yourself Hawkeye." And she very clearly explains to him that she took that name, that moniker, to honor the original Hawkeye, who she presumes, of course, is dead, because everybody does. And she did it with Captain America's blessing, which basically catches Clint a little off guard. He's kind of taken aback by that. But that the Young Avengers don't stop, berating Clint, because he's picking up the uniform of somebody that has just been killed, and he's pretending to be somebody he's not necessarily honoring them. So this tension sort of goes back and forth between a Patriot and Hawkeye and Clint Barton, and he's starting to get the message that, like, maybe this isn't the right gig for him, right? And by this time, of course, Iron Man's uniform has rebooted. He arrives on scene and he wants to arrest these two, and Hawkeye basically gets in the way and says, "That's not what we're going to do. We're going to let these two go away," and he lets them escape. And then he turns his shield back into Tony Stark and tells him that when he gets where he's going, he'll send his uniform back to him. So, but he kind of calls Tony Stark out here in this conversation, and the reason is because he realized he's been manipulated a little bit. Tony Stark is he's somebody who likes machinations, and he likes to be in control. And Barton has realized here that that's exactly what's going on. Where Stark is having a hard time dealing not only with the death of Captain America, but his role in it. And he's trying to create a situation that he can control again and direct what's going on around him. It's having that sense of control, that sense of agency that anchors him in moments like this. And he's used Barton to achieve that. And Barton has now just realized that this was never about Clint Barton having an identity and fulfilling that role for the people. It was about doing it to make the grief a little bit easier for Tony. And so he gives him the shield and walks away from the situation.
Bargaining,
my friend.
Yeah.
Trying to control the situation, to turn it in a different way, yeah, and that's so subtle, right? I mean, because you're like, yeah, I mean, Tony seems to be making sense, right? I mean, Captain America, there's always been Captain Americas. We had William Naslund, we had Jeff Mace. Like, somebody's always stepped up and carried the mantle. But this is different somehow, right? It doesn't seem authentic.
No, I think in a way Clint was bargaining too, right? I mean, he goes to Tony and says, like, well, what are we going to do about it? Like, he wanted to right away move on to what's the next thing we need to do to make this situation right. and what's Tony doing about it. So I think in a way it was the same for Clint as well. All right, so we move on to number 4 of 5, and this one is got Spider-Man on the cover, and it's the depression issue. So the solicitation for this one is he's confronted the deaths of family and friends, but how will the passing of a fellow hero rock the wall crawler? We know we've been secretive about these Fallen Sun issue descriptions, but it's Jeph Loeb, David Finch, and Spider-Man all dealing with life's greatest foe, so you know it's going to rock. Release date was June 20th of 2007 and a cover date of July. And as far as the creators for this one, it is essentially like we said before. So it has the same writer but a different artist. And in this one, Jeph Loeb is joined by David Finch, and we had David on the show just a few weeks ago on episode 290. So make sure you check out episode 290 for David Finch. And he really actually talked a lot about this particular um, issue that he did. And he said it may have been one of his favorite all time stories that he's ever done. So that's high, high praise from David on that.
And it's gorgeous.
It really is.
Yeah.
So on this cover, we see Spider-Man in his black uniform, and he is in a situation where he is on his knees, and his left hand is cradling his downed face, and his right arm is just in a weakened position, like it's the palm is up, and it's just laying kind of down. And he appears to be in a situation where he's could be sobbing or just finished sobbing, but he is anguished. And then behind him is the Captain America shield that we talked about before, bloodied. But now, while there may have been a bullet hole here or there before, now it's being chipped apart and it's being broken. And Peter Parker is there in a pouring rain, like a blood type of rain with lightning bolts behind him. So it makes for a very sullen, very ominous kind of feel to it on the cover.
It is heartbreaking.
Yes. So in the opening splash, we see a cemetery scene, and it's dusk, and rain is coming down, and the trees are barren, and the colors are dark with some hint of light coming from a setting sun. And we see an inner monologue of Peter Parker. And he is there visiting the gravestones of his parents, Mary and Richard Parker. And then we turn the page, and it is a beautiful double page splash, really, really detailed. Before we saw the back of Peter Parker, now we see the front, and he's in his black uniform, but he has his mask off and he's holding it in his left hand. And behind him are all, not only the tombstones and headstones, but there are statues of angels and so on. And again, lightning going on in the background, and it's a hill, so you see, the grass, and the grass is unkept, and the trees again are barren, and you see the roots growing up. It's a very eerie feeling to it. It evokes an emotion just from the image. If you were
Yeah.
not to see any of the inner monologue or the words that he is speaking loud.
It's a very gothic cemetery. I mean, just the detail on the tombstones and the memorials, and I got to tell you, as many times as I've looked at this double split, I think this is the first time I've ever noticed Wolverine.
I was gonna get to that, Bob,
Oh, were you? I'm sorry. Cut it out.
because because as we mentioned in the last one, Wolverine was going to follow, right? In issue 2, he said I was going to follow Peter Parker home, and he does show up in this issue, but we don't know that yet. So you really wouldn't be noticing or paying attention the first time you're reading this that there is a crouched Wolverine in costume, probably 30 yards behind Peter Parker.
Right, because it looks like a gargoyle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then Peter's spidey sense goes off and he gets upset. Not here. And not now. And you see him flip and he jumps and he goes towards somebody who is there with a trench coat and a hat on, and the rain's pouring down, and he's talking. And the next page is this giant splash page, and it's who is it, Bob?
Oh, it's the Rhino, Rick,
Yeah,
in a very large trench coat.
and a hat with being a hole poked through with the horn coming out. But he was standing there with flowers in front of a gravestone, and he's just as surprised to see Spider-Man as Spider-Man is to see Rhino. And Spider-Man comes up and punches him, and Rhino acts very angrily, and he's like, what are you doing here? Why can't you leave me alone? And Spider-Man starts telling jokes because that's his thing, and that's how he deals with stress. And so he fires some webbing into Rhino's face, and Rhino is just getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And then you start to see um, steam coming out of his nostrils, almost like watching a Looney Tunes episode, right? And it's just a little, just to, I guess, emphasize just how angry Rhino is. And he swings at him, and Spider-Man's punching him and pushes him back, and he knocks him into the gravestone that he was just there to visit, which apparently is his mom's. And so you turn the page, and oh my goodness, Bob, this double page splash, humongous. I can't imagine because, these a single page is 11 by 17. So this is a 22 by 17 image, right? So we're talking almost 2 feet wide, and it takes up almost the entire page of just how huge the Rhino is. And he goes after Spider-Man and pushes him into a cement tombstone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I'll kill you for this. And again, lightning sparkling behind him. And also, a really neat effect is like to show like the depth here is like some blurriness
Yeah,
behind him.
the motion, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how he does this.
And then he reveals, like, I was visiting my mother. I just wanted to be left alone. I come out in the middle of the night, not bothering anybody. And the two of them are fighting. And then we see in the shadows Wolverine pop his claws. And Rhino's beating senseless Spider-Man. Like he just wasn't ready for this fury that's coming at him. And then Spider-Man's having a flashback to a similar situation in the past where it was a gigantic Hulk over top of him when he was in his red and blue costume. And Hulk would say, Hulk smash, puny spider. And Rhino's just about to do the same, saying, you'll never bother anyone again. And he raises his fists to come down on a downed Spider Man. And then we turn the page and another amazing double page splash. And it's Rhino coming down onto Spider Man, who on one knee raises his hands, catches the gigantic fist, and yells out, no. And then behind him, in a memory flashback, in a very similar situation, is the Hulk coming down with a gigantic fist over top of Spider-Man. But at that time, it was Captain America coming to shield, literally, Spider-Man and says, "You did well, Spider-Man. I'll take it from here." And it's Captain America. And I want to just make a personal comment here. I love how Jeph wrote Steve. Steve didn't just come to rescue Spider-Man. He also didn't come here to say, "I'll take it from here." He had to say, "You did well."
Right. Yeah.
What
Right.
a
Even though
Steve thing to say.
Spider-Man's cowering on the ground,
Yeah.
right? But that's all right. Steve knows he did his best, and.
And so Hulk is, Cap is punching Hulk. He's hitting him with his shield. And then in modern time, you see Spider-Man punching Rhino and hitting him in the face with his webbing and knocks him down in a similar way that Cap and Spider-Man knocked the Hulk down. And he stands over a downed Rhino and flashes back to Cap saying, "Thanks for the help, son." And Spider-Man says, "Whoa, Captain America thanking me? I'm just a nobody." "Not to me. I couldn't have taken down the Hulk without you." And he probably could have, but he made Spider-Man feel like he was an important part of that whole process. Again, a very Captain America thing to do. So Wolverine at this point shows up behind him and he says, like, "Looks like you handled that." And he throws in a little jab eventually. And Spider-Man's a little upset, like, "Why did you follow me?" And he says, "Leave me the hell alone." And he goes off and he goes from the cemetery into downtown city to go to a place that he sometimes goes to when he's sad and reflective. And Wolverine follows him. And Spidey's like, "Can't take no for an answer." And Wolverine says, like, "Look, I know you had a rough night. I just wanted to make sure you got home okay." And look, I know what you're going through. And Spider-Man's like, "You have no idea what I'm going through. No idea." We turn the page again, and it's a double page splash of a scene, another flashback, but this one is one of Spider-Man's worst nightmares. And it's when the Green Goblin knocks Gwen Stacy to her fall, and Spider-Man can't save her before she dies. And at this point, Wolverine just says, like, this is life. And you've had um he's just Wolverine describes a condition like having a cannon shot through someone's stomach, leaving a hole that is so big and that it has the tendency to reopen again and again. Although the hole does heal back faster each time it's reopened. And Spider-Man asks, if the pain ever goes away. And Wolverine says, "You never get over a death. You simply have to learn to live with the pain, and the life will get better someday." And then that's the end of issue 4.
What another masterful issue, Rick, with
Mhm.
just a lot of wisdom,
All right, Bob, take us through 5.
All right. Final issue number 5 to Fallen Sun, the death of Captain America. So cover is a stark change from the previous 4 covers. We still have same title, same black background, same cutout, but in this case we see the flag shrouded figure of Captain America front and center on a white background. So it is stirring, but also really quite man, quite painful to see for a Captain America fan. I mean, it really
Mm-hmm.
really brings it home, right? What's happened here.
So the solicitation for this one is, can the Marvel Universe accept the death of a true hero? In the wake of a tragedy, we visited the top heroes of the Marvel Universe. And now it all comes down to this. The rock star team of Jeph Loeb and John Cassidy bring it all home in a story that will have true believers debating and maybe even shedding a tear. And the release date for this one, sadly enough, was July 5th of 2007. So normally when we would be celebrating Captain America around Independence Day, this is the funeral of Captain America.
The issue is substantially different than the previous four. And we begin in the streets of Washington, D.C., where it's pouring out. Rain is coming down cats and dogs, and we see Captain America's casket on a caisson being drawn through the streets of the Capitol by a riderless white horse. But despite the rain, the crowds have turned out. There's tens of thousands lining the sides of the streets as Cap's body proceeds toward the Capitol and beyond. And eventually it's going to make its way over the Arlington Memorial Bridge to Arlington National Cemetery in Northern Virginia. And as we move past this first page, the flag draped coffin, we get this amazing double page splash of Arlington Cemetery, and we see a ginormous statue of Captain America with his shield held aloft. It's a memorial, and then we see Steve's casket being carried by his pallbearers, and we see Ms. Marvel and Tony Stark and Sam Wilson and Ben Grimm and T'Challa and Rick Jones carrying the casket to its final resting spot. And the helicarrier is helicarrier. Now you've got me self-conscious. It's flying high overhead. And the first speaker gets up to speak.
Can I ask a quick question about the double page splash?
Yeah.
So you didn't mention those are Marines, right?
Those are. Yeah,
standing there, salute. I have a question for you.
All right.
I don't know if this is a realistic artist interpretation or if this is actually legit, but I look at those soldiers and they're all the same height and same build.
Yeah.
Is that the artist being assumptive, or do they actually do that? Like, do the Marines actually, like, you know what, we want to really look uniform, so we're going to get everybody at the same build and same height?
Well, yeah, to some extent. There are like the height standards and weight standard, all that sort of stuff. Of course, every service has those. Marines are a little more stringent, but this is an honor guard, right? So presumably, normally at Arlington, you would have the old guard, which is an Army unit that is stationed just outside of Arlington, and they handle the formal burials. But this, I just presume, seeing a Marine Honor Guard, that these folks are from 8th and I, which is 8th Street and I Street. That's the Commandant's house, and that is the ceremonial unit of the Marine Corps. And those guys are selected based upon, build, height, similarity. Okay. I mean, they're not all white, obviously. There's different races and ethnicities.
Yeah, but you don't see a short guy. You don't see a tall guy.
Yeah. And I mean, but this is a ceremonial unit. So yeah, they're very selective. But thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, I meant to point out that the Marines were on guard here. So the first speaker steps up, and it's Tony Stark, and he has a very halting start. He says, "Welcome, I am." And Ben Grimm, leans over to Johnny and asks, "I wonder if he's drunk." And the only thing Tony can say is, "It wasn't supposed to be this way." And his eyes begin to well up, and then he turns and walks off the stage. He can't continue on. Very powerful moment. And then Sam Wilson comes up to speak, and he begins to share his recollections of when Steve Rogers first found him on Exile Island and helped him become the Falcon. And we're treated to this amazing splash page that shows Steve and the then green clad Falcon and Red Wing battling the exiles. Although we only get to see Cadavus and maybe the arm of Gruning, but it's a great splash page. And then there's this wonderful scene where Sam asks all the veterans in the audience who served with Steve in World War II. He asked them to stand up. And then he asked the Howling Commandos to stand, and we see Dugan there. And then those who Cap saved from the horrors of war. And we see this elderly woman rise, and we see the telltale tattoo on her arm telling us that she was a survivor of the concentration camps. And then we turn the page, Rick, and we get to see perhaps one of the finest double page splashes that I've ever seen. I absolutely love this double page splash. And it's Cap in midair, recently launched off his motorcycle, hurtling over a fence of a Nazi-run concentration camp with his fist raised high in the air and his shield out before him, this look of determination on his face as a U.S. tank crashes through the fence and a guard tower is exploding behind them, and Cap's motorcycle crashes into a Nazi guard while these inmates, these concentration camp inmates, are sort of cowering in the foreground, awaiting their salvation. It's just an amazing scene.
It really is. Yeah. Did you notice the woman?
I wondered if it was the same woman, right?
Yeah, she has the same tattoo on.
I didn't notice that. Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't notice that level of detail. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty.
And if
cool.
you think about it, this was in 2007, so it was fairly realistic that, here it is 75 years later that, somebody could be 90 years old.
Sure.
And
yeah.
appearing here and standing up.
Yeah. Just a great, man. I love this stuff. I'd love to have this on my wall. It's crazy good. Anyway, then Sam turns back to the audience and he asks the invaders to stand up, those that are still surviving anyway. And we see Union Jack and we see Spitfire. And he asks other heroes who have since given up their capes and masks to stand as well. And there's a line of older heroes, the elderly at this point. Sam continues talking about the impact Steve Rogers has had on inspiring so many heroes, including many of those no longer alive. And he notes that, in fact, Steve always knew that he would outlive many of those for whom he cared and loved. And of course he did. And we turn the page again, and we get another killer double page splash. But this is a World War II scene again, which I'm sure you probably hate, Rick. But it's just an amazing, all winners / invaders scene, right? So we got Cap and Bucky, and we got Namor and the Human Torch and Toro. We got the Angel and Union Jack and Spitfire, and they're battling Nazis and Heinrich Zemo there. And then we've got this great looming head of the Red Skull in the foreground, just bellowing. It's again another amazing double page splash. I mean, a single page splash.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sam then recalls the day, that day that, so many in the audience are familiar with, in the closing weeks of World War II, when the world believed that Captain America was lost. And the day that he was rediscovered, frozen in a block of ice. And it's a really sweet scene at this point. And of course, there's another single page splash with Namor holding that ice-encrusted Steve Rogers above his head in front of the cowering indigenous peoples that he is. Of course, Namor at this point is crazed and he's intimidating these folks, and he takes this big block of ice and hurls it into the ocean. And that's, of course, where the Avengers will eventually find and thaw out Steve Rogers.
Hey, I know the guy who owns the original art to that.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He's been on the show.
Amazing. Oh, of course. Yeah. It's so, an amazing, and there's this great little scene before we see that single page splash of Namor and Steve, and Tony leans over to Carol Danvers and says that was the greatest day of his life. Just a really touching scene.
Mm-hmm.
So Sam, of course, reminds the crowd of Namor's role, not just in giving Cap back to the world, back at the start of the modern age of heroes. But he also points out that Namor can't be there that day. Not that Namor would necessarily show up, but if you recall what happened in that final issue of Civil War #7, when Namor showed up with his troops, he's on the bad boy list as well. And so he can't be there that day. But Sam, points out that rediscovery of Cap by the Avengers was like an important inflection point that heralded the new age of heroes. And so he asks the Avengers to stand up, and the Fantastic Four and the Young Avengers. And then he invites also the lesser known heroes, the ones that maybe aren't superheroes, but the agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., including Sharon Carter, and even Jarvis the Butler gets his recognition. And not to leave out those that can't be there, because, of course, there are still those in the resistance. And he points out the fact that they can't be there, but he knows they're watching. And we see Luke Cage and Spider-Woman and Iron Fist and Doctor Strange, Wolverine and Spider-Man watching the ceremony in their TV hideout. And then I think is perhaps the most amazing double page splash that I've ever seen. And this is Cap's funeral. And we're looking over Sam Wilson's shoulder out toward the audience. And we see thousands of people. I mean, they're stretched as far as the eye can see, almost to the horizon. And you see the clouds, because of course it's been raining all morning, but the sun is just starting to break through the clouds. And those rays of light are shining down on the audience. And Sam closes with what I think is perhaps one of the greatest tributes to Steve Rogers in any comic ever. And he ends on an appeal to hope and unity. And I thought about reading what he said, but I do think the listeners, they need to read it for themselves, Rick, particularly with this background in front of them, because it really just tears at your heart. But it also, especially, when times get tough, it does offer hope, right? And this is what this issue is about. This issue is the final stage of grief. It's acceptance. And what do you do next? How do you move on? And Sam's closing words are really what that is all about. So we leave the funeral, and it's 3 days later in the next scene. And we see this Quinjet landing in the Arctic, snow everywhere, the doors open, and who comes out but Iron Man, Wasp, and Yellow Jacket. And they've got a casket. It's hovering above the ground. And Tony says this has the remains of Steve Rogers in it. And he says that funeral at Arlington, that was for the public. This is for them. And of course, Janet, asks the right question. She wants to know, well, who's buried at Arlington if Steve Rogers is in this casket? Was it a clone? Is it an LMD? And of course, Tony doesn't answer. And he says, I want to start the ceremony. And he begins to, he wants to say a few things that he couldn't quite bring himself to say when he was in front of that crowd at Arlington. He talks a bit about how, what would it be like if the shoe was on the other foot, and he knows in his heart that Steve would have stepped up and would have done the right thing and would have basically exhibited that leadership that he has struggled himself to exhibit. And he wishes that all the other Avengers could be there, right? And he lists off some of them. He lists off Thor and the Hulk and the Scarlet Witch and Hawkeye, and they're all absent for one reason or another. Some of them are off world. Obviously, Hawkeye has disappeared again, but they're all gone, and he misses them, and he feels he's lost Cap as well, obviously, and one of the cool things he says, I miss his battle cry. And again, we get another amazing double page splash, and it is the Avengers in action. We've got Cap and Iron Man and Hawkeye, and we've got Goliath and Hulk and Thor and Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch and the Wasp, and Cap yelling, "Avengers Assemble." Mm-hmm. It's really an amazing piece of art. And then when we turn the page, we see Tony reaching out and touching Cap's casket, and Janet is weeping in Hank's arms. And then we see Namor rise from the water. And of course, Hank's a bit shocked to see him, but Tony says, "It's okay. I invited him here." And Namor approaches them somewhat grudgingly. And he says, tensions being what they are on the surface, he's got no time basically for the land dwellers, but he was there. He came for Captain America. And this is where that seminal meeting happened that we see in Avengers 4. And now it's time to complete the cycle. And he swears that he will take Cap's body with him into the depths of the ocean, and he will lay there undisturbed. And that's what he does. We see him take that casket and enter the ocean, and the casket sinks deep into the waters. And Janet turns to Tony and asks him, what's going to happen next? And Tony doesn't have an answer for her. He just stares at the casket as it disappears out of sight.
Well, actually, one other thing she says is, we're going to have to accept that now. So again, another subtle way of throwing in the title to this issue.
Yeah. And so we're not going to see Cap's casket again for quite some time, Rick, aren't we? I guess we're not going to see it until the Reborn series.
Do we? I forget.
We do.
We do. It's there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's we'll do a recap on that sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Bob, I gotta say, I like the approach. Like, there was a lot of different ways that Marvel could have said, let's show the reaction to Captain America's death in the Marvel Universe. And I like this approach. I think it was clever and respectful in that I think they also understood that fans of the character were going through their own stages of grief, right? And that, there's something to be said. I remember when Captain America 25 came out, people coming into the store, regular customers, and asking me, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
And I remember kind of shrugging it off, saying, "Well, I just have to be patient. Steve will be back at some point. I've been through, Armored Cap. I've been through Wolf Cap. I've been through, all these different versions, and eventually Steve comes back.
Yeah.
I just have to be patient." I didn't realize I had to be that long a patient.
Sure. Yeah.
Because it did take quite some time, years, before they brought him back. But I like the way they approach this, because again, I think I wasn't alone. I think there were a lot of fans out there that missed their favorite character. And I think I said to my wife at the time, I was like, there's a void. You read this particular character once or twice, or depending on how many titles they're in a month, and you do that month after month, year after year, decade after decade, and they become part of your routine, as we said at the beginning of the episode, right? Like routines. But they also become more than that. And so I'm not going to say I mourned the loss of the fictional character, in 5 stages of grief, but I did go through my own kind of like missing the character.
Sure.
And so I really do appreciate the approach that they took to this story.
Yeah. I thought it was, there are a handful of characters, right, that are they're core characters. They're seminal characters. They're characters that like they deserve some respect, just because of the richness and the length of of that character's contributions to the mythos, right? And Cap's one of those characters, right? And I thought this was a very, it could have been a one page, or no, a one shot or something, right? Or not, like maybe not even done it at all. But this was a very respectful way to handle a character that was going to be gone for quite some time. I don't know if they knew it was going to be gone for that long, but I thought it was very, just a very respectful way to handle that. And the other thing is, I was like, man, I gotta tell you, I'm a sentimental guy, Rick, and like I've seen some death, and like I've gone through some stuff, and like this last issue, like just killed me when I read through it again. So I was a little bit like, oh my gosh, am I gonna be able to get through this, But it connects to lived experience, I think, beyond just the character, right? So this 5-issue series can be read as a Captain America story, but the writing is so much richer than that. It's so much deeper than that, and so much more personal than that, probably for Jeph, but also for every one of us readers who connects what these characters are going through with what we have gone through in life. And so it has like a multi-layer impact that we can all get something out of. And it's not just a one-time deal, right? It's not a one-time read. You can go back to this and get something out of it different, new, as our lives evolve as well. So I think kudos to Marvel for this one.
Yeah, and I can't wait for next week when we have Jeph Loeb on the show so we can talk to him about this wonderful story, as well as all the others we talked about, right? Captain America White and Volume 2 and the Ultimate Universe and so on. So we're really looking forward to having him on the show next week. That'll be a real a treat of a conversation.
Yeah, lots to talk about.
Yeah. All right, Bob. Well, this has been an extra long episode, so I think it's probably time to call it a night. Any final words?
No, but I can't wait till next week.
All right. For Bob Lucius, I'm Rick Verbanis, and we thank you for listening to another episode of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.